Thank you for listening to the Run Lift Mom podcast. What started as a passion project in February 2019 now has over 60,000 downloads and over 400 listens each day. It is amazing, and I know it is because of you, dear listener. I want to thank you for your ratings, reviews, and subscriptions. All you have to do is take a screenshot of your rating or your subscription. If you've already done it, clearly this is fair game. Take a screenshot and go to newreleasewednesday.com. That's newreleasewednesday.com. That's going to put you in a drawing for a free Zaya Active outfit, top and bottom piece, valued at over $100. Newreleasewednesday.com. Show me where you have rated and subscribed, and I'm going to get you in that drawing. Thank you so much for making this passion project possible. Welcome to the Run Lift Mom podcast, where we're talking about running, lifting, and momming, not necessarily in that order. And today I've got a two-part episode for you that is squarely in the momming category. Part one is a personal conversation with Emily McCarthy. You guys know her as the co-founder of GORUCK. Guess what? She's also the mom to 3 kids, and she's going to share a personal story about her youngest son, Ryan, and how he was diagnosed with a sensory processing disorder, and the ironic treatment for it, given the family owns a brand like GORUCK. Then you're going to hear me speak with Tiffany Higgins. Tiffany has over 20 years of experience in pediatric occupational therapy, and her background is in heavy work or proprioception. She's also the director of Camp Leap In, which is an inclusive camp in Greensboro, North Carolina that caters to development for kids. Tiffany's going to complete the circle for Emily's personal story, allowing you, mama, to have a greater appreciation for an area of development you probably never thought about. So without further ado, first, Emily McCarthy's personal story, and then Tiffany Higgins, our occupational therapist. All right, welcome for the second time. I'm thrilled to have you, Emily McCarthy, co-founder of GORUCK.
Hi, Susie. I'm glad to be back. It's always a pleasure.
Well, I do love your brand very, very much, but I haven't brought you back this frequently just to talk about rucksacks. We're actually going to talk about momming or parenting today.
Yes, there's a lot of that going on in both of our lives.
Yes, and you've got a very personal story to tell. I'm actually going to link to a blog post in the show notes, so depending on where people are listening, they can either swipe up or click details. But I'm going to have you talk through this experience that you wrote about, which Emily knocked me off my feet. It's beautiful, and for a lot of moms, it's relatable. Can I get you to start at the beginning and tell me about your son's personalities, and then when you knew, maybe something was different with your one?
Yes, of course. It's not something that we're ever at a lack of words for. We're talking about our children, right? It's something that I feel like a lot of parents we talk about it a lot. We think about it a lot. So, to put it into words and share it is another extension of that. So Ryan, he's 3, and we call him Wild Man McCarthy, and but he wasn't always like that. For the first 2 years of his life, everyone was like, "Oh, he's going to be your chill third baby. He's going to just go with the flow." He was very quiet. Jason always carried him on the front, with the baby carrier, and took him outside a lot. He was. But something happened when he turned 2. It was like he got a memo that he was supposed to be terrible. That morning, he bit both myself and my daughter on our behinds, that morning on his 2nd birthday. And then it's just been downhill ever since in terms of biting and scratching and just difficult behavior. So, starting then and up to today, he's just super physical. I mean,
Okay.
just more than I could ever imagine. I mean, I have an older daughter. She's 8. I have a 5-year-old son. And I already saw a difference between the two, which I was a little bit shocked at. But then Ryan took it to another level. we'll climb anything, we'll jump off of anything, we'll get so dirty that it's just unbelievable, and it's
So you're not
something.
a rookie parent, but you're like, wow, this is a little beyond like, oh, he's all boy.
Right. So, but again, conventional wisdom, we were like, man, he's just all boy, or he's just, a wild child. And, he's just the third child acting out, needs attention. I mean, we ran through every possible scenario, and we did that for a while, and we kind of thought, okay, he's just a biter. that's just what it is, right? This falls into the realm of normal behavior for 2 to 4 year olds. We did our research, we talked to people, all these things. But on the flip side, he's like my most polite child. He will say thank you, he will say please, he was very sweet and loving, but it's almost like you've got this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde version of him. And so at some point I was like, this is abnormal. And it was really when we started the socialization, right?
Okay.
Because siblings don't really count to the same level, right? They get into each other's space, they fight and whatever. And then it had the two boys, they're 21 months apart. Jason calls it National Geographic every morning. I mean, it's really like they're just lion cubs going at it on the couch. I mean,
that is so comforting for me to hear, as the mother of boys as well.
Yes.
But you're right, like there's the siblings, and then, I mean, until a certain age, they're not necessarily cooperatively playing with their peers.
No. I mean, but Ryan did things that my other kids never did, right? Like climb the stairs the opposite way, like in terms of like the on the other side of the railing, all the way up, and try to climb the fence and and jump down. I mean, he also escaped from the house when he was a year and a half, somehow managed to get out and ran to the beach, which was about, we're talking 200 meters away, and
So
just a
scary.
diaper and one shoe. And thankfully a neighbor found him and brought him back. But it was terrifying because, if he had gone another direction, there would have been a road that would have been difficult. So that kind of like probably kicked it off, where I was, that was just one of the moments where I was like, oh man, this kid's different. I got to put special locks on the doors for him. But about like when he was 2.5, I started, reading more and seeing how he interacted more, and realizing these other kids his age, boy, girl, they're not doing these same things to the same extreme level.
Right.
So that's when, I just started to explore on my own. But really, everything kind of came to a head during a fall parent-teacher conference. He goes to a Montessori school, so he's in a class, a toddler class there. And the teachers have tons of experience, over, probably 2 decades. And she said to us, I just went to a conference and they talked about this sensory seeking behavior and sensory, processing disorder. And that was kind of the first time I had ever heard of those labels. So she said, I'm not really sure what you think about that, but it really matched up for me. Just sort of this, being super physical, getting very messy, not wear shoes. So she gave me some materials, which I linked to in my blog. And then I just, of course, started just wanting to read everything on it.
Right.
And that's when I came across I really started to nod my head when saying this makes sense. And, it was like anything, you put a label on something, you start to look at it differently. So I told the teacher, like, hey, I think you're onto something here. Basically the next step for me was to find an OT. And luckily there's an OT that comes recommended that goes to his school. So we started that. And I have to say that, it's never linear, but over the last few months, he's biting less. He's scratching less. He's transitioning better. He just today went number 2 in the potty, which I'm very happy about, which was like a big power struggle for a while that we just ended up saying, okay, he'll be ready when he's ready. Mm-hmm. But it was much more so than my other children. So we really, basically we took some outsiders, who I would consider a subject matter expert in his
Hmm.
teacher, and combined it with some online research, and then, reached out for help.
Awesome. So it's funny, and of course, hindsight's 2020, right? So you think about that time that he snuck out the house, and at the time, it's like, wow, that I mean, it was probably scary enough
Yeah.
to want to put it behind you. But then when you have the teacher who has observed him in his environment
Right.
say, "Hey, here's just an educated something to consider," then all that stuff starts to make a little bit of sense.
Yes. So the teacher was telling me before, I mean, that she was doing things in her classroom, and they do spend a lot of time outside in this school. And so he would always want to climb up things. So they had this big palm tree, with the big kind of like palm things jutting out.
So, listeners, they're in Florida.
Yeah, we're in
Just
Florida.
so you know. So, picture those Florida palm trees.
Yes, but this one wasn't like just the skinny one with the palm fronds. This is the one that's a little shorter and stouter, but they have like a lot of like part of the bark sticking out. And she said that he just wouldn't stay away from it, and no matter what she said or did, and that she eventually ended up just duct taping the ends of it so they wouldn't be sharp. And he would just climb it every day and sit up on it, say he was a monkey or a cheetah, and I asked her if the other kids did it, and she said a little bit. They would just go a couple rungs up. But I liked how she adapted the environment, to kind of, extend it for him. And
Right.
and and since then she has gotten, because of Ryan, she's gotten their playground expanded, so now they have even more outdoor space to work with.
I love it. Oh, you've got to love those wonderful educators who really care about our babies.
Yes.
So that educator says, "Hey, you probably need to see someone," and blessedly the occupational therapist, the clinician, was also connected with that school environment.
Yes.
So, what did they tell you?
Yes. So that was great. It started right away, and I actually, she did an evaluation with him. I was not present. It is actually sometimes better, if the
Mhm.
parent's not there. So this happened at school, and there was probably a few sessions that happened before the Christmas break. And so I'd actually never met this OT. You just, basically got in touch, and she said, I have a slot opening. And I just said, let's just give it a try. What's it going to hurt? But then, the holidays come around, and he goes on his holiday break, and she says, hey, I have an opening at our actual office. It would be great to meet you. And, you can bring him in and he won't miss a session. So that about, a month or so later is when I first got to meet this OT. And, we had a nice talk. We kind of talked about the evaluation. She explained to me sort of what it meant. And she said, he's behind in a few areas developmentally, but I know if we work through the end of the school year, he's going to be up to speed and he won't have to do this. And I was like, oh, you kind of think like, oh, easy. but then we got more into, she asked about home life, and I'm like, listen, we're at this point where it's starting to become disruptive. And this is something, to your earlier question, when did I start to really see that something was wrong? It started to stress us all out. Everyone was walking on eggshells around him. Our mornings were super hectic. Nothing mattered. Even if we woke up super early, he just was transitioning poorly, and we all were going to our respective work or school stressed.
Right.
And that's when it's like, okay, we really need to get some help here. So I told her about that, and when she was talking to me about that, she said, I really recommend some heavy work for him. And at this point, he's running around her little cool, office with all these cool things to do. And my other child is crying because he's not allowed to. But so I'm a little distracted, but I'm like, I keep hearing about this heavy work business, but I don't really understand what it means. What is it? And she goes, well, it's like if you put weight in a backpack and he wears the backpack. And I looked at her and I was like, you're joking with me, right? Like, I thought she must have known about GORUCK and rucking and
And
I
for listeners who haven't heard Emily's, the first time she was on this show, and I will link it below,
yeah
GORUCK is a lifestyle brand that their bread and butter, you guys, is military grade rucksacks. They
yeah
have apparel and boots and all this other stuff that is in the closet I'm recording in, but like their bread and butter piece, it's bags you would put weight in.
it's for rucking. We are the rucking company, right? So I looked at her like, I think you're pulling my leg, like you're joking with me. And I said, do you know about GORUCK? Do you know what rucking is? And she goes, no. She was being sincere. And I laughed and I said, I can't believe this. I looked at her and I basically took a minute to kind of explain what GORUCK is. Like you said, it's basically rooted in special forces, which my husband was a Green Beret, and they put weight in their backpacks, and we basically are the company that's kind of democratized it and brought it to others outside of the military. And we do a lot of events. We sell a lot of products based on this. And she was like, huh, well, that's great, then you'll be supportive in this journey. And I said, well, yes, we will. And I kind of told her we already do this, but you know, how it is. Like, we've got this kind of rambunctious kid who wants to play in traffic. So our go-to on a lot of these rucks has been like, okay, he's outside, we'll let him walk in these safe areas. But then, when it's not okay, we just strap him in his stroll and he cries and, pitches a fit, and it makes everyone miserable. But we're always like, hey, you know what? We're gonna make it through here. But this changed my perspective, and it started to say, hey, I'm gonna like not only just bring his ruck, but I'm gonna encourage him to wear it more and to ruck with us. And if he needs a break, he can get a break. I mean, he's only
Right.
3. And sometimes I let him bring his scooter. He loves that. But he wears his little ruck on it. And there's a difference. Like, there's a just even the rucking people, right? We could have done, there's ways that we could have been doing it a little bit better to fit his needs. So now we still do like our weekly rucks with friends, and even around the house, I'll be like, hey, you seem like you need to be grounded, and let's wear your ruck. Which, it was fascinating. Both the OT and this other friend of ours who's neuroscientist, they said, she told me that the ruck and the weight in their backpack, the heavy work, reminds them that their body is connected to them. This is sort of those neurological pathways, and this is at the root of the processing disorder. And granted, I'm no expert in this, and I know that you're going to be bringing someone on that is, but this idea, it made a lot of sense to me. Like, it's just reminding them,
Right.
like carrying something heavy is reminding them, oh, this body of mine, it's connected to me, and I should probably be a little bit more protective of it, or I should, watch
We
where
talk
I'm
about
landing.
the mind-body connection. I mean, I know that you are a collegiate runner. Listeners of this show know that we talk about, for anybody, the mind-body connection, but this is another very specific example of the mind-body connection. And it's
Yes.
beautiful because it helps the child develop
Yeah.
I don't even want to say in his way alongside his peers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you put in his ruck? Do you put like, I mean, I'm trying to picture like the little
Yeah.
like baby plates, or what do you put in? Does he put toys in there? I don't even know.
We do, well, first his water bottle. He has a Yeti water bottle because they don't leak, and it's pretty heavy when it's full. Like, it's not nothing. And then we put in some books or some toys. It really depends on what he wants. We ask him, hey, what do you want to put in your ruck today when we go on? And he'll let you know. Oh, I want my blankie. I want my water bottle. I want my dinosaur. I want my book. And, it's something, right? And I get asked this a lot. It's like, really, you just need a little something in there. Like, these kids, they shouldn't have anything more than, 5 pounds, because that's usually, significant, portion of their body weight. It's like a fifth of it, a fourth of it.
Do you think he likes packing it? Like, that's part of the experience?
Oh yeah. I mean, yes, exactly. So all these sorts of things, he just really, and all kids are like this. They want to be included in the process. They want to have a say. And, giving him a choice, not too many choices. Do you want a book or do you want a toy, or, things like that, or, just to direct him. But yes, so he loves the process of that. And again, we do like a 3-mile loop, right? And he can't always, he won't last for that whole bit. He won't ruck the whole time. But it's the parts that, the onset and the process and doing it for part of the time, I can tell the behavior has changed. We're seeing him being more part of the group. He's transitioning better. He's more excited about it. He probably feels just a little bit more, like you said, attached to his body and what his mind wants to do, and understands the transitions better.
Oh, it's wonderful. And it's a mindset change for parents, because as parents, right, we're like, oh, well, let's bring something that he can be pushed in. And this is, okay, let's be flexible as we're out on our 3 miles, but let's keep in mind that he can do some of the work as well, and it's good for
Yes.
him.
Yeah. So, it's, not a ton it's not like we had this like overnight everything changed, there's no magic, formula, there's no thing. But the thing is that we're making progress, and now that we know what we're dealing with, our mindset is more intentional, right? We
Awesome.
already spent a lot of times outdoors. We already spent a lot of time rucking and biking, but and we knew it was good for the kids, but now we know it's like his medicine, and
Yeah.
that we have to do it. We have to be just more, disciplined about it even than we were, right? It's
Right.
not like just it's a nice thing to do. And it's like, in it, it's good for us to get out as a family. It's really like, no, Ryan needs this. And we
Right.
will all benefit from him getting that dose of heavy work and being outside and being active.
I've had some recent guests on the podcast who have been on weight loss journeys. And so it reminds me that their mindset is also that it's that preventative, like, this is something I need to do for my health and well-being. And so
Yes.
now you're in charge of his health and well-being, but I mean, it's really
Mm-hmm.
a very similar mindset.
It is. And look at this. The other part of this is that, you know, if you can solve your problem without something major, like, you know, prescription drugs,
Hmm.
surgery, like, why not give it a try?
Right.
Even if you aren't going to, have a dramatic effect, it's just, you're not going to have to, be dependent on another substance, or have to go into recovery after surgery. Sometimes you don't have the choice. And I realize that, we're fortunate that the prescription of this wasn't just, hey, give this kid some, this kid obviously has attention deficit disorder, and, he's hyperactive, and give him some drugs to settle him down. I would have fought that, because I've seen this kid just focus in on things. It's not that he has a hard time focusing. His problem is different.
Hmm.
And he really just needs to be, like I said, reminded that his body's connected to his head.
Hmm.
And that's something that I think is newer. I don't know if, when you and I were growing up, when this, it was first like trying to understand why kids had learning disabilities, or why they weren't, doing well, or why they were acting out. I feel like it was a one size fits all. And now it's really interesting to me. And that's kind of why I shared it, because I was like, I had never even heard about these more nuanced, you know, processing disorders. And, you look on the spectrum of autism and Asperger's, and you look at all these things, and, you say, well, what if it's only a part of this that is similar to my child? Everything else is matching up. Like, he's social. Oh, these other tells don't match. So I think it's really important as parents to not only, take in good information and good advice, but also to check it out and say, what is this? I know my child best. What
Yes.
fits with him? What is his behavior like? And I think that's really one of the messages in my blog I wanted to kind of get out, is to say, this was a great news for us,
Yeah.
because it's helped our family, and it was done in a way that it was not a huge lifestyle change for us. It
Yeah.
was just a reminder that we need to be more purposeful about this because he really needs it.
It really does take a village. I mean, you know Ryan best, you're his mother.
Mhm.
So it takes you having that open mind, and then that change agent, the educator, and
Right.
then the clinician, the occupational therapist, but then also for you and Jason as parents to say, okay, this is the prescription. The prescription is heavy work, and we
Yes.
are going to commit to doing that regularly.
Yes, that's exactly what we've done. And, it's not just rucking all the time. Like now I'm intentional about, I come home from the grocery store and I'll say, hey, kids, especially Ryan, come help me bring this stuff in. Oh, this laundry detergent is really heavy. I don't know if you can do it. And he'll be like, I can do it. And he feels proud. He feels like but I know it's allowing him to carry something
Yes.
heavy and bring it in, and then he's just tuned into me and he wants to know all the things I bought, and I'll help him put things away, and he just feels like a contributing member of our family instead of just being this kid constantly in tantrum mode, going from one tantrum to the next, or playing by himself quietly until the next transition happens, right? So it's
It's
been
beautiful that you're looking for those moments throughout the day that, to be fair, could be done faster, but you're making them teachable moments for
right.
him in the realm of heavy work.
And so what was so great is that this GRT, so a GORUCK Tough parent, because we have our own parent sort of Facebook group, and that's where I originally put this kind of interaction with the OT in as a joke, and to kind of be like, can you believe my own kid was prescribed rucking today? But out of it, I got so many great comments, and that's what inspired me to write the blog. But one of these GRT parents sent me um, a list of heavy work um, activities that was actually better than some that I'd seen in articles. Like it was just a little bit more, and, full. It had a lot more to it. And then he told me his story with his child and how they use GORUCK sandbags to, lift them up while the kid's practicing his spelling words or doing math problems. And I thought, wow, that's just so great. And it's the same sort of connection, also prescribed by an OT. And I had other OTs in that group, say that they prescribe it, and so many people came out and said like this is kind of why they ruck, because they do it with their kids for these reasons. But that list of heavy work, Susie, what really got me was that so much of it was the things that we grew up doing, or our family, our parents and grandparents grew up doing all the time. The lifting heavy things, riding your bike outside, um, you know, just more like you're a kid and you're outside, you're meeting up with your friends, you're going to a sand lot, you're building a fort. There were so many things in there that I was like, wow, this is basically all the things we used to do before we had on demand shows and iPads and
Right,
AirPods and all these things that are kind of like, or social media that is kind of taking our time.
right.
And it just I mean, listen, my kids have iPads for long lines and long car rides, and even when they just need to relax. But it's really an important reminder that they need to be doing this heavy work, and
Mhm.
this could go. The great thing about it is that what is prescribed for Ryan, my other children can also benefit from.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I love it. It's a neat story. We're going to link to everything so people can,
Awesome.
for example, see your blog. They can see that list of heavy work. I don't want to skim over the fact that you went to your community and they met you where you were with
Yeah.
love and support and resources. Look, there are people that are listening to this just because they're like diehard Run Lift Mom. You guys, that's your lesson. If you don't have someone with a sensory, processing disorder in your life, this is a parent who spoke up and was met with resources and love. They lifted her up to the point where she wrote a blog and came on a podcast to talk about it. We should all be doing that for other moms and other parents.
Yes, I can't say that enough. And Susie, you're so great at this, and it's really inspiring. Um, you know, my advice that I've been trying to take myself, and also, watching people like you that are doing this, is that it's really important to share your story. It is really, I am still getting pulled aside to this day, and DM'd by moms and dads telling me, I read your blog. It's really something that you wrote that. And then they share their story, with me. And it doesn't have to be on a public forum so much. You can do this privately if that makes you more comfortable. But I mean, I just had a close friend of mine that I ran track with, and she pulled me aside at this Georgetown event and said, I read your blog, and we went through the same thing. And if you ever need to know anything or talk about it, I've been through it all. And and she said, I just didn't even know at the time who I could talk to about it, this sort of thing, she just didn't. But now I think it's great. So in addition to that, it's important to listen to podcasts about these kind of things. You get smarter. And, when you can't sit there and be looking at a screen, just like, when you're out rucking or, shopping in the grocery store is my favorite time to listen to your podcast. But and just keep sharing it. If it's not online, it's with people in person, or, or you're taking in information through other means. But it's been really amazing. And I've been kind of thinking about, like, what's the next step? Like, what do I talk about next? Like, do I, an update on his progress and where we are now, because it is a journey, and it's not over yet.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We know stories are sticky. We're going to have our occupational therapist come on and just hit some points, have a clinician come on and hit some of the points and kind of what was happening with Ryan and why. It's going to make for a really fascinating episode. But to your point, Emily, and what I want to close out with, because everyone can use this advice, is stories are sticky. We will have the clinician on, and you guys, she is awesome. But people are going to remember your story with Ryan. They won't necessarily remember the formal diagnosis or the prescription for a child with X symptoms. They remember the personal story.
Yes.
So thank you for mentioning or encouraging us to share our story.
Yes. No, it's great. I'm really happy to do so. And I think, we just need to continue to do this. We're all in this together.
Awesome. I did not have a rapid fire for you, but I do want to ask you very quickly. I'm putting you on the spot. What's in your rucksack today?
Oh, yes. My laptop,
Awesome.
workout clothes.
Y'all, she's got, so people can't see that are listening, she's got it right beside her. I mean, it was right beside her.
Yeah. Wonder Woman patch, multicam. And I've got, a notebook and things like that. But yeah, I always pack workout clothes, because you never know when you're going to have that opening to go for a ruck or a run, or, maybe a yoga class or something like that. So that, and I always have it. It's I don't carry a purse anymore.
I love it. I went to the Zaya Active Summit, which is, guess what? 900 women. Yeah. And I was the only one with a single bag for my weekend's belongings. It was a GR1. Yes. People thought I had lost my mind, but look, the whole weekend fits in there. Yeah. Thank you for showing me.
Yes, you're welcome. Well, I'm glad you did that, because it's also, how much easier was it to, one, pack and stay organized and unpack when you got home?
Yes. Boom, boom, boom.
Great.
Emily, thank you so much. I'm really just, thank you for coming on with your story. Thank you for thinking of this show as a platform to share your story. And I'm so inspired by you and what you're doing for mothers and parents out there.
Likewise, Susie. Keep up the great work.
All right. Welcome to the Run Lift Mom podcast. Tiffany Higgins, you are a pediatric occupational therapist, also the director of Camp Leap In. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you, Susie, for having me. I'm excited to talk with you today.
It was important to Emily, McCarthy, and I to bring on a clinician to talk about the heavy work side of things. So listeners have just heard her personal experience with her son, and it's a journey they're currently on. But I wonder if you can tell me a little bit about heavy work.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you would ask me to do this. I have over 20 years of experience, and I started as a new grad really passionate about the sensory processing piece of becoming an occupational therapist. So this is perfect. It's a perfect thing for me to speak to because I feel so passionate about it. Proprioception is a fancy word for heavy work, really. Proprioception
Okay,
is
so
our
I'm calling
body.
it heavy work, but
Heavy
in the
work.
OT world, it's called proprioception.
Absolutely. And it really is just the body's sense of self in space. So it's basically how we know where we are in space. All of your muscles in your body have proprioceptive receptors, and that senses the degree of stretch. So these receptors in our muscle give us all of the info about our physical position in space. It provides us the feedback so that we can maintain our balance and move through space. We think of it as a pyramid, as a triangle. At the very bottom of that triangle are all of your sensory systems, and that includes your proprioceptive system. That's at the bottom of the triangle. Feed those senses to get the developmental pieces at the top. And at the very, very top is your academic. Below that is your social, emotional health. Below that. So it's this pyramid that graduates on up. So if you don't feed those senses at the bottom, if you have differences with how your body integrates sensory information, heavy work, proprioception, vestibular, that's not all working, then you're going to see deficits at the top of that pyramid.
Interesting. So the example that Emily gave with her then 2-year-old, of course, he's a little bit older now, but the example that she gave, of course, prescribed to her by an occupational therapist, was to put stuff in a book bag and go for a walk. Of course, that's an example. Can you give us other examples of heavy work, or why would that, we joked that it was kid rucking, why would that work for proprioception?
So that's a great question. I often tell my kids that's a very common thing that we will tell families to do to help with transitions, because it gives that input, that feedback to where her little fella's body was in space. If you take your foot right now and you stomp it on the ground, you get a big sense of feedback, as to where your body is in space, which is where that idea of heavy work comes from. So by putting that backpack on, we're basically weighting down his body so that he feels where his body is in space. There are lots of other ideas. I like to break it down into, for proprioceptive, carry, push, and pull. So carry, push, and pull becomes important for kiddos that age. And that can mean pulling. They put a backpack on him. You could pull a wagon around the neighborhood with toys in it. You could push a shopping cart, carry, push, pull. A lot of hammering. We do a lot of hammering, like at our summer camp, because it's a sensory camp. We take golf pegs and hammers, and we hammer them in the dirt outside. Even nails. And if you get to an older child who's 8, 9, 10, or 11, using real nails, even 5 or 6. But golf pegs, there's ways to grade a lot of that activity.
Yeah.
So carry, push, pull are great.
Okay.
Then you can move into household chores. Lots of household chores that provide heavy work. Carrying laundry baskets, wiping off the tables, washing the car. So it doesn't have to be
pushing a vacuum. Could that be one?
Yeah.
Okay,
Perfect.
great.
Pushing a vacuum,
I
mopping.
love that you're giving us examples for different ages, because it sounds like this same rationale, or this same I don't want to say rationale. This same proven method works at different ages.
Absolutely. And I think the thing is to remember, so household yard work is great for older kids, lawnmower, raking, a lot of that type of stuff. And then also sports, moving into that sports arena, swimming, karate, martial arts. Martial arts and swimming are two of the best, because they are not, especially if a child struggles with some of the proprioceptive systems, because they're pretty individual. A lot of times what happens as children get older, they struggle with the social emotional piece and the confidence piece. So plugging them into sports that if you don't have to work as much on that and it's more individual, can be individual, like something in martial arts becomes really great for body position. And when you're in the pool, you're getting so much input to your proprioceptive system.
Love that. Love that so much. So when should Emily went through her personal journey, and when, for example, the biting was a signal that she had, and then just observing her 2-year-old alongside his siblings, when would you recommend maybe a parent listening if Emily's story resonated with them and they were like, oh, when should they seek a OT?
Well, that is a great question. And I think, so development is a wide spectrum. We know this. But I think that parents, as a clinician, I always, and I firmly believe that parents really are the expert of their own child. So I think that a lot of times their gut is not wrong, that something is amiss. It may not end up meaning that it's a sensory processing disorder, but I think, when we're talking sensory processing disorders, there's a wide range. There's modulation, there's discrimination, there's dyspraxia. There's a reason that there are clinicians out there, and it's to help them move through this. So I think, they should follow their gut. If there's one thing amiss, like let's say your child doesn't like tags on the back of his shirt. Okay, that's not a huge deal. You can cut that tag out. That's one area. We all have a sensory system. There's adults who don't like tags. There's adults who don't like walking in the sand. But I think if you see a trend, if you see some atypicalities persisting that seem a little bit off from your other child, or maybe some of the other children you're seeing him play with at the playground, then I think if it starts to interfere with his or her ability to engage in those typical daily life things that kids would typically do, then I think it's time to reach out. Early interventions, it is important because early diagnosis leads to that early intervention. And it can help with the social emotional aspects in a family. I think a lot of families suffer for a period of time because they don't get that early diagnosis and that early intervention. And it really impacts, it kind of can throw the whole family into chaos.
Yeah. I mean, Emily talked about the teacher, his preschool teacher, being able to say, hey, you should speak with someone about this. Listeners know that I'm a triplet mom, so I have 30-week triplets. They had a lot of therapies to include OT.
Right.
But we knew that was coming because of their, they were preemies. It's hard when it's the day-to-day. And then, to your point, it messes up the family's route. I don't want to say messes up, but that it disrupts the family's routine, or that it's just a little bit off from what you would expect.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. So both of my children were preemies, born early at 32 and 33 weeks. And of course, sometimes ignorance is not knowing things, but I was like, neurologically, they're going to need this. Well, in fact, it was true, and they were both very different, but both of my kiddos had some differences in their sensory processing because neurologically they didn't develop in the, they had to do a lot of that outside of the womb. And so it does, that's one of the biggest things I noticed is that it can impact, it can improve the family life. That's the best way to say it. When you have that support, I also think it just validates the parent in some way that there is something a little bit different. And like I said, maybe the child doesn't end up being diagnosed with a sensory processing deficit, but I think it's worth going and looking at. And like I said before, it is a pyramid. So if there is a deficit at the bottom with how they're integrating, or I don't even want to say deficit, a difference. If there is a difference as to how they are processing that sensory information, it is highly likely, the data shows it's going to impact their development up to the top of that pyramid. So by doing that early intervention at the bottom, we can help with the social emotional growth of the child, the overall confidence of the child, their overall academics later on. So, that's important too.
I love it. I want listeners to hear you say, trust your gut and early intervention is best. In a worst case scenario, you take the child to an occupational therapist and the OT says, nope, nothing's wrong. That's a worst case scenario, you guys.
Right.
If they are diagnosed with something, if I'm understanding you correctly, given that pyramid, it's a game changer for later in life.
Absolutely. And I don't want to also say, oh my gosh, for listeners who might have a 10, 11, 12-year-old, oh no, I missed this super important window and now what? Because older children can benefit from a later diagnosis of sensory processing differences as well. The difference is that early intervention piece, our brains have more neuroplasticity. So, getting in there and treating a 2-year-old, 3-year-old looks a little bit different because of that plasticity and the gains that can be made from a neurological standpoint. That does not mean a 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old, and even an adult can make changes and have changes. It just, a lot of times that moves more from direct changes to the neurological to more of coping strategies, really learning how your body works, what your sensory system looks and feels like, who you are, and then strategies to cope with that from a social emotional standpoint. So any child at any age really can benefit from that. So if you're a parent out there who has a 12-year-old and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing these red flags, still go and get that evaluation.
I love it. Thank you so much, Tiffany. I'm going to put the information for your camp below. I appreciate someone with 2 decades of experience and a passion for sensory processing. We have a mutual friend, and when she said, I have the perfect person for you, now that we've spoken, I know exactly why she said that. And she's right. You are the perfect person to speak to this.
Well, thank you. She's had to hear me go on and on and on for years about movement and heavy work and all of these things that I think children need and are not getting enough of. So I thank you for having me. It was a real pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily and Tiffany, for coming on the Run Lift Mom podcast. I'm going to put these ladies' information below. So depending on the player you're listening in, you can either click the hyperlink that says details or swipe up and you'll be able to connect with them online. Listeners, I hope the themes here were very clear. Number 1, support other parents. Think about Emily's personal story and how she was supported in this journey. And then number 2, we got tactical with Tiffany and you got those heavy work examples. If your child or someone else's child in your circle also has a sensory processing disorder. And until I get into your earpiece again, remember, for while bodily training is of some value, godliness is of value in every way, as it holds promise for the present life and also for the life to come. That's from 1 Timothy 4:8, and this has been the Run Lift Mom podcast. Hey, Run Lift Mom listeners, you know I'm the mom of 4 kids under age 5, and therefore I am always looking for ways to work smart, not hard. Anchor is the smartest way to make a podcast. Let me tell you why. First of all, there are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, but Anchor will also distribute your podcast for you, so then it can be heard on places like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and a whole lot more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It is quite literally everything you need all in one place. And y'all, it's free. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Thank you for listening to the Run Lift Mom podcast. This began as a passion project in February 2019, and now, you guys, it is legit my favorite thing to do each week. Record with the guests that come on Run Lift Mom, and then share their knowledge and expertise with you. I love this. I have done a lot of things right with this show. The thing that I've done wrong, I haven't asked you to rate, review, and subscribe enough. You guys, this is how other people find the show. So please do me a solid, rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you for being a listener of Run Lift Mom. You guys, I'm thrilled to announce a new partner on Run Lift Mom, and that is Audible. I've been an Audible member for over 10 years, and my favorite part, hands down, it's the gift of time. I use the free app to take notes as I'm doing my long run and I hear something fantastic, and you are going to love it. If you want to try Audible free, visit audibletrial.com/runliftmom. That's RUNLIFTMOM. Again, for a free trial, visit audibletrial.com/runliftmom. Hey, Run Lift Mom listeners, if you are here for business or entrepreneur type topics, I want to let you know I have a new show. It's called Serve Then Sell, and it's available on 10 different channels, including Google, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. The idea here is not to just lump in the business topics with running, lifting, and momming. I want to create more of a separation. I hope you will come hang out with me over there. Again, the name of the show is called Serve Then Sell. Enter that into any search box and you're going to see it come right up. We'll be running, lifting, and momming over here. I hope you'll still hang out. Check in over there if it will be a blessing for you.